Today's lesson that we learned in class was 1.5, rename numbers. Now this is a tricky skill that we need to be able to understand all about our numbers before we can rename them. Let's take a look at some of the problems that you might see. Okay, so here we have the number 420, and we need to figure out how many tens we have in 420. Now we talked about how numbers are made up, and we call visuals for these types of numbers. So if we have 420, we can use our flats that we've talked about in class. Each of these flats represents 100, and then we can use our sticks, which represent 10. So we want to know how many tens. We want to know how many of these little sticks there are in the number 420. Now, because one of these squares represents 100, we have to ask ourselves, okay, we have 100. How many tens are there in 100? We can count by 10 to figure that out. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. There are 10 tens in 100. So each of these squares is worth 10. Each of the flats that has 100 little pieces is worth 10 tens. Okay? So we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 41, 42. We have 42 tens. Now we can look at it a different way as well. We have our picture that helps us out. We can also break this number down. We know that as we increase by place value, we also increase and multiply times 10. So we have 1, that's in ones place. When we increase to the tens place, 1 times 10 equals 10. Okay, so we increase the place value by 10 by moving from my ones place to my tens place. Now if I move to my hundreds place, and I'm going from 10 to 100, from 10 to 100, I need to multiply 10 times 10, and that's going to equal 100. Now if I'm going to go to my thousands place, in order to go from 100 to 1,000, again, I have to multiply times 10, and so on and so forth. So when I understand that each place value, when I go from one to the next, I'm multiplying times 10, I can grasp this number a little bit easier. I can take a look at my number 420, and I can identify my tens place. My tens place is right there. There's a 2 in my tens place. Now I know that this 4 represents 4 hundreds. And before, when we were looking at, we said, okay, how many tens are there in 100? There were 10 of them. So in 400, that means that there are 40 tens. That's what my 100 represents. My 2 represents my tens place, so there are 2 tens there. So 40 tens plus 2 tens is 42. I can also look at this number and make it super simple for myself and say, okay, here's my tens place. I'm going to draw a box around this. This is how many tens I have right here. 42 tens. So that's our first step. Now let's take a look at a larger number. Those were lots of different ways we can solve these types of problems. Here we're looking at something a little bit bigger. We're looking at hundreds. We want to know how many hundreds there are in 5,300. Now, again, we can break our number down with pictures, and we can draw thousands blocks, because my 5 here is in the thousands place, and so this is one of my thousands blocks. And now I have 5 thousands, and then I'm going to draw my hundreds, and I have 3 of them, and we represented our hundreds with just our flats. So we have our cubes that represent our thousands and our flats that represent our hundreds. And we know that this is 100, this is 200, this is 300. And now we have to think about our thousands. Okay, if we have 1,000, how many hundreds is that? Well, I can count by hundreds, but I can also think about what we just talked about when I increase by place value. So if I'm going from 100 to 1,000, I know that I need to multiply times 10. So in order to go from hundreds to thousands, I'm multiplying times 10. So within each of these little cubes that we wrote, each of those cubes is worth 10 hundreds. 10 hundredths, 10 hundredths, 10 hundredths, 10 hundredths. So if we count by tens, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then we have 51, 52, 53. 53 hundredths. Now we can also look at our number, and we can break it down. In the real simple version, we have 5,300. And I want to know how many hundreds. So I'm going to underline my hundreds place, and then I'm going to put a box around everything to the left of it, and that is how many hundreds I have. Let's look at another one. Now this problem's written a little bit differently. I have 53 10,000s, and they want to know what number that represents. So I'm going to start with my 53. And just like back here, when I have to underline that place value, I'm going to do the same type of thing. Here, I'm going to underline my last number, which is my 3. And I need to understand that this 3 is going to be in the 10,000s place. Now, in order for that 3 to be in the 10,000s place, I have to think about how many zeros I have to add after it for that to be in the 10,000s place. So I have, thinking about my numbers, I have my ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. So that 3 needs to be here. And then I have my 100,000s, and my 5's going to be there. And I need to put zeros in all the rest of those blanks. So that would be my answer in this case. Oops, I missed a 0. 530,000 would represent 53 10,000s because my 53 is in my 10,000s place. Okay, now we could represent that with fancy pictures, but that's a really big number to represent with pictures. So right now I really need to be able to conceptualize and think about my numbers. Okay, let's look at a different type of problem. This one gives you even more words that you have to look at. We have 3,000s and 200s. All they want us to do is write the number. So again, my 3 is going to go in my thousands place. My 2 is going to go in my hundreds place. And if my 2 is in my hundreds place, I have to figure out how many zeros I'm going to add so that my 2 is in fact in my hundreds place. So I have to think about my place value. I have my ones place, my tens place, then my hundreds and my thousands. And I need to fill those in with zeros. So I could read this number, 3,200. That would make it easy for me. Take those S's off. Those S's make it complicated when it doesn't have to be. Okay, here's another problem. I have the number 4,700, and I want to know how many 47s is that? Well, again, I need to recognize my place value, and I need to identify where my 7 is. Here's my 7 right there. I need to think to myself, what place value does that 7 represent? Well, that 7 is in the hundreds place. Okay, so if I think about this a little bit longer, and I'm trying to think, okay, 47, I can think, what do I need to multiply 47 by in order to get 4,700? If I multiplied it times 10, well, then I'd bring that 1 0 down, and I'd be multiplying 1 times 7 and 1 times 4, and I only get 470. So I could look, okay, how about if I multiply that times 100? I could bring both zeros down, and then all I have is my 1 times 7, which is 7, and my 1 times 4, which is 4. That's what I'm looking for, which means I need to be multiplying it times the 100, which means my 7 needs to be in my hundreds place. So 4,700 is equal to 47 hundredths. If I had 47 of these squares, these flats that represent 100, and I added all those up, I would get to 4,700, or 4,700. Alrighty, well, let's take a look at one more problem, just so that we can make sure we understand this concept. We're going to look at a big number again. We're going to look at 27,000s, and we need to represent 27,000s in standard form. What does 27,000s look like as a number? Well, I have my 27, and then again, my 7 needs to be into my thousands place. So I know that after my thousands place comes a comma, and I know each period has 3 numbers in it. My ones, tens, hundreds. So 27,000s, I could cross off that S to make it less complicated for me, is just 27,000. 27 thousandths. Okay, I hope this helps you with your homework. I'll see you in the morning.